So while Australia's premier racing category, V8 Supercars, only races in the AU of S and New Zealand, there was a time when they took on the sleeping giant. The early 2000s, the time of the iPod Touch, good music, and when Britney Spears did some weird shit with snakes. And it was a time when Supercars chairman, the polarizing man himself, Tony Cochrane, decided, you know what? Let's take Australia's best form of racing to the Shanghai International Circuit in China. The race, which was initially announced in 2004, kicked off in June 2005. Holden, yeah, remember them? Rest in peace, Holden. You'll be remembered. And Ford kicked off their rivalry, with the race weekend being dominated by the red side. No pun intended. The Holden racing team with driver Todd Kelly won the first two races, with teammate Mark Scaife winning race 3. This was also the weekend that saw Mark Winterbottom's chassis get completely KO'd by a drain cover, which, surprisingly, the exact same thing would happen to Juan Pablo Montoya at the 2005 Chinese Grand Prix. The end result was that Mark Winterbottom couldn't compete for the rest of the weekend, basically. His chassis was written off, and he was put to the sidelines, unfortunately. So, the races. Todd Kelly will now forever be known as the first ever race winner in V8 Supercars outside of Australasia, which, in my opinion, that's a pretty cool title to have. That season also saw an amazing 5 different race winners in the first 5 races. Jeez, man, I wish we could get that nowadays. But anyway, I digress. The 25-year-old started race 1 6th on the grid, passing the guys up the front and leading off into the distance for the remainder of the race. The Sunday race would see Kelly finish 3rd, with teammate Mark Scaife winning the race and securing Holden Racing Team's 50th overall round win, which is pretty cool. A thing that, HRT don't exist anymore, so that's depressing. Overall, the race weekend was decent. It was pretty cool to see these cars on a foreign circuit basically for the first time ever. As much as they looked kind of out of place with the massive spaceship looking ass grandstand and shit like that.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
But anyway, the question is, what actually happened with this race event? Was there a market for supercars in China? Did it succeed? And why is Renee Gray? The following year would see the tentative calendar feature a Chinese round, but would ultimately be replaced by Australia's Monaco, Winton Motor Raceway. However, that year did feature another supercars event outside of the AU in Bahrain, the Bahrain 200, 400, shit. Anyways, it was an interesting case study with this whole China V8 supercars thing. With my 2023 mindset, it's pretty weird to remember a time when supercars raced as far as Abu Dhabi and China, or even in the United States of America. So of course, with the race overseas, with all the freight costs to transport equipment, etc., it all costs money. And it's said that many of the teams were hoping to secure additional brands, either from China or from Australia for the round. However, not many did. Holden, for instance, wasn't even a dealer in China. They didn't even have a market for their cars in China. However, Ford, was quite big at the time. Buick is also another GM brand alongside Holden, God rest its soul, was brought into the event as a sponsor due to the brand being prevalent in Chinese markets. Personally, as I did say before, it was pretty cool as a novelty to see supercars in China. But personally, I couldn't really see the Aussie V8s in China for long, as its whole persona and flair, didn't really fit in with the Chinese market. Obviously indicative, as the race was only held there once. I mean, it is cool to look back on these races, on YouTube or whatever, and see these fire-breathing Holden Commodores and Ford Falcons all decked out in Aussie branding and whatever. Arrive in a completely foreign country and race. It was a really cool thing to see. And I mean, there were talks of the category returning back to China in 2012, but obviously that didn't come to fruition. It would be interesting now, with the Camaro v Mustang, could we see a trip back to China? Or even, as mentioned for a few years now around the supercars paddock, a trip across the pond to Singapore as a support category for Formula One? Anyways, that's just my whole thought process on it. I think it would be pretty cool to see the Aussie V8s back out in the foreign market, but, with rising costs and stuff, it's pretty hard, I'd assume. Anyway, who knows? It would be pretty pog to see supercars back on foreign soil, that's for sure.